Do you want one of the microphones? Do you want a microphone? They're both off. Do you want me to use Press and hold. Oh, you're good. I'm just going to do this.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Brown Bag History Lecture Series that we hold every second Wednesday here. My name is Linda Van Ingen. I'm chair of the History Department at UNK, and we've been hosting these Brown Bag series once a month in collaboration with the Kearney Public Library. So we really appreciate the support we get and the collaboration we have with the library, so thank you. Today we have a great presentation. But before I introduce our speakers, I want to just mention the next couple brown bags that are coming up. March 8th is Autumn Langmeyer, and she actually is one of our graduates, both undergraduate and graduate students. And she now works at History Nebraska in Lincoln, and she'll be here March 8th to talk about the history of Nebraska's state historical markers. So she's part of a project that is reworking and rewriting some of the markers and putting new ones up, and so she'll talk about that. On April 12th, one of my colleagues, Dr. Mary Beth Ailes in the History Department, she's going to talk about early modern diplomatic tensions in the North Atlantic between England and Denmark. So non-U.S. history subject. We have a lot of online resources on our History Department webpage, so feel free to always go to uk.com/history to find out what else is going on with the History Department. But for today, we are going to focus on Kearney Creates, and our topic is the history of arts and culture in Kearney. And our speakers are Drs. Chuck Peak and Nathan Tye. And I was told to keep the introduction short because Chuck Peak, of course, is widely known, well-loved, and has a long list of accomplishments. Was professor in the English department and still continues, obviously, to be very engaged in the community and in the arts. So if you don't know him, you will know him very well soon. Our other speaker is Dr. Nathan Tye. He's a colleague of mine in the History Department, and his area of specialty as Assistant Professor of History is Nebraska history. So I'm sure you're getting to know him as well, because he's been really one of the inspirations for this Brown Bag series. Certainly been directing and coordinating it. So with that, I'd like you to please join me in welcoming our two speakers, Dr. Chuck Peak and Dr. Nathan Tye.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you all for coming. Thank you for hosting this. I think the world is lucky that we have such a good history department at UNK, and I think these brown bags are one of the best things that's happened regarding arts and culture here in a long, long time. And to have, and they're appropriately hosted at one of the great institutions of art and culture, the Kearney Public Library. So I'm really grateful to be part of it. Just before we get going, I just want to say, since we're talking about arts and culture today, a word of sympathy to Gina Garden and her family over the death of her mother, and to the Welch family on the death of Marcia Welch. Sorry for both of those losses, and our hearts go out to those families. I think you're going to take an interest in today's topic, and we just learned this morning on Channel 13 a broadcast about this, that maybe we've not done all the work we should have done about this, because the Carol Stopp said she had never heard of Kearney Creates until this program came up, and that's our bad, and so we're trying to correct that here today, because you hearing about it and others hearing about it is the secret to its success. The people currently responsible for Kearney Creates, a website, are some of them are here, and I'd like them to just stand as I introduce them, and if I miss somebody, please tell me they're here. Lauren Bonk up here in front is on our editorial board, and Jerry Fox, where's Jerry back there, and is Rick Brown here? There he is, right over there. Rick Brown is on, and of course Nathan Todd. And I'll tell you why they are the board at this time in a little bit. And Gene Jacobson is also a member of our board and could not come today because of that funeral was going. We're going to talk about Kearney Creates, the website, and who knows, maybe someday Kearney Creates the movie, I don't know. Celebration and chronicle of all of Kearney's arts from the beginning to tomorrow, from Gary Stratman's accordion to the annual school exhibits that take place at Mona or at Brick Walk or at the Kearney Public Library. We're going to be working on the people who first taught art and music and writing here in town, clear up to the people who are now performing, and we want to deal with every aspect of the arts, particularly of parents who have children who grew up to be people involved in the arts, either here or elsewhere. We call those locally grown, and to help celebrate the sesquicentennial this year, we're going to be featuring locally grown people, kids who grew up here, got nurtured here, got interested in the arts here, continued with that interest into their later in adult lives. But stages, performances, scripts, teachers, venues, those are all the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen by many until they appear on the Kearney Creates website, kearneycreates.com, and on the table in the back there is a flyer. There you can see the opening screen, the Opera House, and you can pick up my card for information on how to be in touch with me. You can pick up the Kearney Creates card that tells you how to get to the site, and on the back of the thing that shows the Opera House, there's a list of things we're interested in, and you may be the very person who can provide them. So I hope you'll take a look at those handouts back there and take one with you today. So that I want to stop there with the seed that grew into this website. I had gotten the idea for a book, and I'd gotten that idea from an incident that took place at our house. Years and years ago, a young student at Kearney High School had written a little story, and he decided he wanted to make it into a little film, a little video. And for that, he needed two things. He needed a place where a girlfriend was going to live, and he chose our house. And he needed rain, because the story is a young man and his friends have gotten into a lot of trouble. They think they better get out of town. The boy can't stand to leave without saying goodbye to his girlfriend, our house, and it has to take place, him coming back as they leave town and then decide to come back so he can see his girlfriend, has to take place in the rain. So we have to wait for this production until this young man calls and said, it's raining, we can go. We wait, and the call comes in, it's raining. Beat the band, just great. And one car goes out with the camera, and one car goes out with the girlfriend and the guys. I mean, the guy's coming back to see the girlfriend, and in they come to Kearney in the rain. which stops as soon as they hit the city limits. They stop, they make a phone call to us. We got to have rain. So I'm outside on a ladder taking up a sprinkler onto the roof of our porch, one of these sprinklers that goes like this. And so here they come. The car pulls up, the cameras are rolling, the sprinkler's going like this. The guy comes up to the door opens, and the girl, and that's the story goes on. The camera was provided to the young man from the storehouse of things in those days available at Kearney High School, purloined by Sandy Mahaly and given to the kid, whose name turned out to be Johnny Bokenkamp. And from that scene, I said, we've got such a rich heritage of arts and culture here. There's so many things that have been written and danced and performed on the stage and composed and been over at Cunningham's Journal's back beer garden. And thank God Heath Malcolm at some point decided to try to get a beer license during the Kearney sidewalk days. They turned him down. And my son said, what, didn't he know what town he grew up in? But now we've got those things, right? So all those things came to mind. I said, let's do a book to celebrate this. So got a number of people together, and I better look at the list or I'll forget who all was involved. Kate Benzel, who sadly has been moved to Minneapolis, but is still working with Kearney Creates. And we'll hear more about her in a minute. Pat Jones, the artist, Terry Center, the museum, the musician, Kerry, well, he's actually a museum of himself because he knows. Kerry Garrison, the photographer, Rob Lusher, master of all things in Park Prairie Arts Brothers, and Terry Schifrin's a poet, and Jerry Fox, who at that time was still doing things with Mona and was, as people know, in charge of international things at the university for many years. We gathered those people together and we started to brainstorm what would we do with this book. It got more and more depressing. Every time we'd meet, we'd come in with great enthusiasm and in a few minutes, because there was so much. And finally, we just made the conclusion, we're either going to have about a 300 or 400 page book with 2 lines apiece for everything that ever went on, which would be useless, or we're going to have to narrow down and just have a book that features 3 or 4 writers, 3 or 4 artists. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted this to be not just a few select people, but we wanted this to be Kearney's arts, Kearney's history, and how that built a culture here. We think that aspect is very important, and as Kearney Cultural Partners is anticipating submitting a grant for a creative district downtown, we've been thinking about what all contributes to a community, and we think, you have commercial interests and they create an economy. But community is built by the arts and culture that are here. And they're very important reciprocal relationships. So we thought that was very important, and the more we got to it, we just said it can't be done. And then Kate said, maybe it could be a website. So that did seem like a real possibility. We could have a website. There's some problems with that. None of us knew anything about a website. But Kate had a brother named Kelly Nowicki, and Kelly is somewhat of a website genius. He mostly has done tourism sites for various places. But Kate said, would you be interested at all in this project we've got? And he said, all my life what I wanted to do is a community's arts and culture. So Kelly got on board to create a website. It's still a matter, if you who know websites will know, it's still in the process of creation. And we depend on other platforms for use on the website. And when they update, we update. So the thing is still a work in progress, but it's getting, we thought it was good to start with, and I think it's getting better and better as it goes. Kate Benzel came here from a remarkable family. Her brother Kelly is a kind of genius at websites. She is, as many of you know, was a stellar figure in our life of arts and culture here. She was a fine scholar at teaching at UNK, but she also, and many of you were there for this, did all those Sandburg programs that appeared at the Merriman and at the different venues around town, including the World Theater. And so she also has a brother who goes around the world teaching people printmaking. He's an extraordinary printmaker living in Poland. So it's just a family of people who, what was that line in the Steve Martin movie? A guy who knows a thing or two about a thing or two, right? And that's that family, which was fortunate because, as you could tell from the list I gave you of the people that were meeting, those are also people who know a thing or two about a thing or two, and that's local. They know something about the arts and culture here. Some of them grew up here, and so a wonderful combination of getting a person who could do the right website with people who were creative and could think of it. And we dreamed up what is now, I think it's 8 pages of single-spaced topics that should be covered eventually on this site. None of us will live long enough to make a dent in that. I believe the last count that I did after 3 years, we've got about 100 entries on the site, and there are hundreds to go, which brings me back to what I said earlier. But that depends on you folks, because we don't have all the information that you have. We don't have all the pictures in albums that you have stuck in your attic someplace. We don't have all the memories. There's a person here just told me he was here and watched the Opera House being torn down. I don't know if there are any others here who saw that event, but there's someone here who did. Those are the memories that we need to evoke that then says to somebody, what can evoke with you? I'll tell you a couple of stories. I went to the Kearney Women's Club to give a presentation, and I mentioned at the end of it that we would really like to know more about 1733. Wrong place to do it. Hands went up all around the table. We used to dance there, they said. We used to dance out there. I said, wonderful, you'll have what we need. I've not heard a single thing. I've never gotten a single thing about 1733. And the only thing I know more about 1733 is Larry Harvest. He's done quite a bit of work about it. And if you don't all of you try this, but if you walk into the men's room at Alley Rose, there's a good picture of the old 1733. Well, go ahead. Do not first. Just go in and see the picture. But I also was invited to give a presentation at the Kearney Noon Rotary Club. And in that talk, I said at the end, you know, one of the things we'd really like to know more about is the bell tower, the carillon at UNK. And after the meeting, a guy came up to me and he said, I might be able to help you a little bit with that. He said, my name's Jeff Hendricks, and I was the architect for the bell tower at UNK, and I have a trove of pictures. So fortunately then we got engaged, and he wrote up a very nice thing about how he'd come to Kearney, how he'd gotten this job, and had pictures of the stages of the construction of the bell tower, and that's up on the site now, and it wouldn't be if he hadn't come forth and said, I've got what you need. And we're really dependent on that. I think we've got that whole list and we can pursue it, but the real list is out here in your minds and your homes and your memories and your attics. So I hope you'll give a thought to seeing what you might come up with that would be useful for chronicling the arts and culture here. We had just a moment of that this morning, and I'm still trying to trace this down, but this morning on the NTV show, Nathan had this picture of the industrial schools band, and that's what became the YRTC. And one of the early directors of that band was a fellow named Leo Kelly. And Leo Kelly was my junior high band teacher in McCook. He was quite old by that time, and his son Bill Kelly had taken over the high school band that he had once been the band leader for. And you practiced real hard for Pop Kelly. We call him Pop Kelly because Leo chewed on cigars all day long. And when you missed a note, he would take your instrument and show you how it should be played. And you'd get that instrument back, and if you were a trombone player, as I was, you'd look in the mouthpiece. And then you say, I'll practice hard. Well, he had been the director at the industrial school band. And the only reason I know that is because there's a story I learned later on that some kind of parade downtown, I think a Veterans Day parade, and here came the band. And people said, aren't those people locked up out there? And nobody told Leo they couldn't come downtown and march with the band. He had a band, so there they were. And I think I'm on the track now of a picture of Leo, and I think I may be on the track of more of that story, and that's the kind of thing we're looking for. We'd like to do articles, entries that have a factual basis, but also have an anecdotal basis that tell the stories of how people got into the arts and what they did in the arts and how they were received and what it meant to Kearney. So we keep working on things. And as I said before, from any aspect, if you go to the site, you'll see David Knapp's one-handed saxophone. You'll see all kinds of things to do with instruments. You'll see things to do with performances. You'll see with composers, with writers, and keep in mind that's all been done from a dream of one person who knew nothing that could contribute to this. I'm not a local. I didn't grow up here. I don't know anything about websites. I'm not the best advice on any of this, except to have a real desire to get a group together that did know something and find a way to do it so that could be something public, and to hope that will go on for a long time. There are people who've helped that to go along, and I want to mention them at the end of this program. But the real thing is to say, well, what goes into an entry? What is the historical research, whether done by professionals or lay people? What goes into trying to put together something that would be useful as an entry for this? And for that, of course, I know nothing, but Nathan Tye knows all. So I'm going to turn this over to Nathan, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about some items he's brought and how that research is done and what constitutes what we need for articles. You're going to use that?
Yeah, well, thank you, Chuck, for that introduction. So I'm the historian for the project, and I've certainly talked to some of you about this project at various points in times. And one of the things, as a historian, is we always want the stuff, right? We want the pamphlets, the papers, the letters, the photographs, all of that documentary record. But the problems with arts and cultures is that doesn't always stay. You know, we've been looking for this dance hall out of 1733 photo sport for quite some time now. And a lot of things that we've also heard are just rumor, speculation, a hazy memory of a concert you might have gone to in the 1970s, you know, or something. And so we're trying to kind of piece that together. And as Chuck kind of talked about, Kearney's had a very long and rich history of arts and culture in the community, well before its founding. And that's what the project is really trying to get at, from Pawnee artisans who are producing materials to the early painters, actually from the Hudson School, who are passing through what becomes Kearney and painting. For example, there's a lovely oil painting of the cemetery at Fort Kearney at the Cleveland Art Museum in 1864, which we would love to bring to town. There are sketches by soldiers. Mark Twain passes through on his way to Nevada and writes about it in Roughing It, his memoir of his time in the American West. Jules Verne writes about passing through Fort Kearney and around the world in 80 days and is attacked by a group of Native Americans on a train and then rescued by the soldiers at the fort. This very much did not happen. But nevertheless is a very early literary depiction. Jack Kerouac on his classic beat novel On the Road stops in Shelton for about a day as he's hitchhiking across the United States, and then does ultimately pass through Kearney in the middle of the night and just makes passing reference to it. So there's an incredible amount of material that we're working with, that we are soliciting for you, and working with our cultural partners in the community to ascertain what they have, what they might remember, what might be in a cabinet, you know, and what have you. And so we're working with the Buffalo County Historical Society, the University of Nebraska, at Kearney's Special Collections and Archives, as well as the Public Library, the Museum of Nebraska Art, and then just folks who are kind of bringing us stuff, sending us intriguing photos, or kind of letting us know. And I know that, again, Chuck has put out a call for stories and materials, and I know many of you in this room, as he's already talked about, have these stories. I know that there's at least one roadie from the Maynard Ferguson, the Canadian jazz performer, in the room right now, who has a backstage pass from that show. I know that there are others who have been to other performances and other things. But I do have a collection of materials that kind of get at this wealth of you know, arts and cultures in the community. And first, though, we'll look at the best things and that really get at a lot of this. So the Library of Congress, one of the great treasures of Nebraska history, and I teach with these all the time, are the photographs of Solomon Butcher. So we all probably have a vague sense of who Solomon Butcher was. He took photos in Custer County of sod houses and early homesteaders. But the other thing to know about Solomon Butcher is he was an awful businessman. He only lasted as a homesteader for about a day, and then he went to medical school, dropped out of medical school, moved back, opened a photography studio, and publishes a book, the Pioneer History of Custer County, which a copy is right here, which was all of his photographs and the stories, and there's a number of photos of Kearney in here as well, in addition to being about Custer County. But he made no money on this. Not that many people wanted photographs of sod houses and the history of Custer County. There were only so many people in and around Broken Bow who could buy this book. And so he moved to Kearney and spends more time in Kearney than he does in Broken Bow. Takes more photos of Kearney than he does in Custer County. But you wouldn't know that if you've only seen that sod house photos. There's also a copy of this book here at the public library, which Solomon Butcher donated to the public library, which is in the collections here as well. But he took thousands of photos, and they were such a rich treasure trove of the history of the community that in the 1920s, the state of Nebraska bought them from Solomon Butcher. All of his photos, all of his papers, all of his notes. The legislature passed a special act, $2,000, and then there was a long fight with the legislature about whether he was going to get his money, and then they tried to undercut him. It's a whole long thing. But they do ultimately end up in Lincoln. And they're, again, such a treasure trove that the Library of Congress has digitized all of them, taken these delicate glass plate negatives and made them available. And these are all of the photos. There are 500 photos of Kearney. And you can get a sense of this early history. And much of it is about arts and culture. The photographs in and of themselves. Solomon Butcher is not the best photographer in town, by far. He is largely self-taught. A.T. Anderson is a much better photo, also John Stryker, who are competing with them. But you get many of the aspects of early Kearney life. So some of you might have had the misfortune of living in Green Terrace when you were at the University of Nebraska Kearney. This is now Antelope Hall, Nestor Hall, just north of Copeland Hall. This is the first dormitory on campus. But this is also part of the history of the arts and culture in Kearney because it was designed by the Frank family, by the younger son, Augustus Frank, had an architecture firm. He also designed what is now the G.W. Frank Museum. So this is also a lost architectural treasure of the community, talking about arts and culture in the community. And I do know some of the remnants of this building survive. I do know some of the cabinets are in a couple of homes in the Kearney community. I don't know if any of the other pieces of the building have survived. But there's also an architectural heritage. As we all know, many beautiful buildings have been lost in this community. Chuck already talked about the Opera House, the original train depot downtown, many of the beautiful Victorian homes in a wide range of the neighborhoods. But Butcher gets at a lot of what is going on in the community, the festivals, the activities, and the day-to-day climate of town. Here is the Campbell Brothers Parade. This is also art and culture. We take a very generous view of what art and culture is. It's not just fine art, it's also circuses. And this is the Campbell Brothers Circus. They're actually from Fairbury. They're a local circus. Going down Central Avenue, you can see here, the radio station is still here. Score Marketing is here. And this is, the day-to-day experience of many of the members in the community experiencing arts and culture. Here, they're going to see all sorts of different stuff. There's also some lovely photos of elephants going down Central Avenue that Butcher also documents. And so these are the type of things that we have been relying on. We have this documentary record. We have digitized newspapers and other materials that are kind of telling this story. But this is only part of what we're able to get at. Because why the arts have been so successful in the city of Kearney from its inception in December 9th, 1873 is when we become a first-class city. If you want me to get really particular on Kearney's birthday, is the institutionalization of the arts. We have been a community, we've had not just one opera house, we've had multiple opera houses and lecture halls where entertainment was coming to the community. With the university and the theater department, the music department, the fine arts, the English department that is bringing poets and writers and scholars into the community. We have 2 movie theaters downtown. Admittedly, only one is a movie theater, the other is dental office. But we have 2 movie theaters, okay? And those have functioned and been bringing arts and culture to the community with the Museum of Nebraska Art. And so we're also looking at ways in which institutions that no longer survive supported the arts in the community. And one of the recent discoveries for part of this project is the records of the Delphinian Society, which was a women's educational group in the 1920s and 30s here in Kearney, and their records very thankfully were donated to the Buffalo County Historical Society in the 1970s. And the minutes and many of the things survived. And Chuck and I are both Willa Cather people, fans is a very generous, I think, term for what we have our appreciation of Willa. And her sister-in-law was the president of the organization, and many of the minutes are in her handwriting with Ethel Cather. And she definitely would have meetings where she got to brag about, oh yeah, my sister-in-law won a Pulitzer Prize. So I'm gonna read you from Death Comes for the Archbishop because I know a real writer, and that's in the hub. We do actually have that. She did mostly Willa Cather parties, so she got to brag about her sister. And so these records survive. And so we can see what many, and this is actually the year that they learn about ancient Mesopotamia. So they have a meeting once a month, learning about ancient Mesopotamia and Babylon. And so these types of records tell us about people in the community wanting to learn more, continuing education, having organized meetings, having a lot of this institutional involvement. We also have been really interested in the aspects of the university. This is the first school fight song. This is the sheet music for the march of the Kearney State Spirit of the Kearney State Normal March. There's no lyrics to it, unfortunately, and it's also been laminated, which is also rather unfortunate. But again, you can see how the university has been a bastion of much of the arts and cultural heritage of the community. We've also been having to unravel a lot of very broad kind of genealogies, because what we've also discovered is many of the members of the community who are involved in the arts, they're both triple threats. They have multiple types of artistic endeavors that they're involved in, but then it spreads through the family. A.T. Anderson, who's probably the most prolific photographer in town, and some of you in the room might have been photographed by his daughter, Min Warlock, when she took over the studio. But she also painted. So some of you, I'm certain, have Min Warlocks hanging in your house. And so this is a smaller painting that she did of New Hampshire. But she was a painter, she was also an organist, she was a photographer, and so her artistic contributions to the community are very well documented. A number of her pieces are at the Museum of Nebraska Art here in town. But it wasn't just Min. Actually, her sister Ruth was a world-renowned photographer, and this is one of her books. She was a world-renowned photographer who traveled to Spain before the Spanish Civil War and took hundreds of photographs of rural Spain, and was an expert on Spanish culture, Spanish arts, and was the curator of photography at the Hispanic Society in New York City for many, many decades. She actually took her father, A.T. Anderson, to Spain in the 1920s. And there's wonderful photos of him, and he's a very tall man, he's over 6 feet tall, in these very tiny Spanish homes, developing photos in very cramped quarters. And their father, A.T. Anderson, who, again, well-known photographer in the community, he also was interested in woodworking and made his own violin, was involved, and he would sit on the street corner and fiddle in front of his photography studio. And we have accounts from folks who remember, he had a pointed beard, he's a very beard and a very distinguished man, kind of remembering that part of history. And we've also been, looking at a lot of the literary production that has come from the city. We are blessed with a wealth of poets, and I know a number of you are actually in the room right now. So I'm not going to single anybody out. Instead, I'm going to point to, we have a number of, texts and works by local poets, and the late Don Welsh, the late Shirley Bittner, and the late Nancy Westerfield, all of whom lived in Kearney, studied in Kearney, or taught in Kearney, or some combination of that. And so we're also trying to retrieve a lot of that information, because many of our local poets published in journals or other types of periodicals that are not widely available and are hard to track down. So we're also having those conversations, reaching out to folks as well. And as Chuck alluded to, we're also looking at more recent things. So he very generously brought the final draft of the pilot episode of The Blacklist from Jump Up Again. So that script is also up here as well. So when you're talking about the history of the arts, it's a very eclectic kind of documentation. Because if you think about it, what records do you keep when you went to the 1733 ranch to go dancing? Did you write it in your diary? Did you remember if you had snuck out? Did you tell your parents? Did they remember? Do you have a ticket stub from a concert? We have rumors of bands kind of stopping through town, or did you hear something? Did your grandfather meet, a famous actor who passed through town? Or did you have a grandmother who went to the USO, which is now right next to where the Alley Rose was, and listened to Duke Ellington or Glenn Miller during the Second World War? Did a great-great-grandfather go see Houdini at the Opera House? Okay. These are the types of stories that we're asking for and we're looking for, because again, telling this history of arts and culture in the community requires input from the community. We really want to hear your stories, we want to see your stuff. And so please do share that story with us so we can share it with others. And I believe, Chuck, you're going to talk about.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. You want to bring up the site again?
Yep.
KearneyCreates.com, all lowercase, and it'll take you right to this site. And this is what you'll see when you first get to the site. And at the top, you'll see the navigation things. You want to look for people's names. You want to look for groups' names, places. We're really pretty good ahead on the people. We're not so good on the places. There will eventually be a map on this site so that you can locate things. That'll be coming. But that's what you're going to see on the site. The Opera House, because when we originally thought of a book, our plan was to have an opening about the Opera House and a closing about Mona as the two great hubs of the arts that have been here in Kearney. And then what happened when we opened up? If you go back 3 years, then we had COVID, and still do, and then we had Mona closing for its rebuilding. And so from very early on, we said, all right, we're going to wait till all that's done. We're going to say, now that we're doing a website, the timing won't matter. It won't be a front and the back of a book, but we're still thinking of those as two pivotal points. One from the distant past, one current and preparing us for a future. And so that's why we have the Opera House up first, and why, if you go, we still don't have very much about Mona. But for one thing, it's very difficult to shut down, take care of everything, make sure all the art is taken care of while we're gone, et cetera, and try to write articles for Kearney Creates, right? At least that's what they told us. Anyway, and down here you'll just see the three major divisions, but they're deceptive. Music, but that includes dance. Art, but that includes, of course, sculpture. Literature, but that includes blogging and essays and other things and plays. And one of these days you're going to be very, very lucky in another season at KCT Theater to hear a play, see a play by a local playwright who's blossoming right here in the front row, and it's been agreed to produce, and they're working on it now. So
UNK.
Yeah, UNK. So what I say?
It's KCT. Understand.
And she's also very involved with KCT and Kramer for that matter. Okay. Anyway, let's go to just one of the sites. We're going to go to Don Welch because many of you knew Don, many of you listened to Don. If you go there, what you're going to find is you're going to find a kind of description of Don. And if you went down far enough, you would find a link that would take you to Don reading. There he is with what? His beloved pigeons. And then he has a little dialogue about pigeons, and then he has a poem. And Jason Miller, this is a side benefit. Jason Miller, comment by, was a student at UNK, one of our very finest students, and a basketball player up there when it was KSC. And Jason has taken upon himself as one of his life projects to gather together all of Don's works and to comment on them and to gather a critical mass around them. When I moved here, it was interesting. I had been to school. There were three main poets in the state at that time. In fiction, the beginning was with women, right? Willa Cather, Mari Sandoz, etc. But in poetry, the three main poets were Ted Kooser, who went on to become poet laureate of the nation, Bill Clefcorn, who was in Lincoln, and Don Welch. And all four of us had been in graduate school together. We didn't know anything about each other's arts in those days. We just knew how to drink beer together. But anyway, it was really interesting to move here and then to eventually teach here and to get to know Don really well, because Don was a superlative a poet. And just an example, when you go, this is the kind of thing you'll find. Let's go to the West Herd. This is our best. And what time is it? We may have done. When we first put this together, we tried to brainstorm, said who should be the very first people to go about. And I think we all agreed that Wes Hurd was kind of the dean of Kearney music, and such a remarkable person in all kinds of ways. He was so helpful to other musicians. He had a long history in a career, and even not so long before Wes died, he was playing at the Eagles Club for the annual Mike event. Mike is a charity for musicians named after Mike Adams, one of the finer musicians that we had. And he would play for that. And I some of you were probably there when he would sit and he'd play Old Black Magic, which was sort of his signature piece. So we put up this entry, and we thought that would be nice. And then somebody saw it, his daughter. And his daughter said, "I have something you may want." She said, "I have a recording of Wes when he was 20 years old singing with the Air Force Band." And she gave it to us for the site. I don't know if we can get down to it on this. There it is. There it is. Let's see if we can bring up sound on that.
I don't know if you sound.
Might be really bad.
Might be. Let's see what we get.
What do you want?
And there he is. And there he is on the balcony singing the song you're hearing right now. Better looking than you may remember.
And only you can put out the fire. You're all I'm waiting for. The rain that made me created more. And every time you're darling, down and down I go. Round and round I go, in the pit, loving a swim, I'm in, under that old black magic ball. I shall stay away, but what can I do? I hear your name, and I'm afraid. Aflame with such a needed life, and only you can put out the fire. For you were the lover I've been waiting for, lonely face that made me created for. And every time you lift me Darling, down and down I go, round and round there, in the pit, loving a pin my head under the moon, my candy goes on.
Oh, we felt so lucky to get that. And then, of course, it went to our heads and we thought, boy, stuff's going to pour in now. And it's a little harder to do than that. But it's coming along. We just got something else that he was mentioning the other things a minute ago. And we're just about to mount an article by a gal that grew up here and has been a journalist and now a blogger for a history center. And she did a piece, recollection of her dad, Dale McCammon, and that's it was part of an article in the Hub about Kearney cemeteries, and so there's the cemetery again comes up again. Can we go to Jenny Homan just to get all the arts in? Some of you know that one of our well-known artists here is Jenny Homan. If you ever shop up at Hy-Vee, you are standing pretty near where she used to sit in the meadow because she liked the horizon from that spot, and you see many of her horizons. And she's done talks down here at Mona about her work, and she's very successful at it. And there again, a local person grew up here, knows the town, knows the culture, and captured one feature that I think we would all say. One of the things we share in the periphery of our arts and culture is we know that this is a place you can go out and see beautiful moonshine and beautiful sunsets and sunrises. I don't know much about the sunrises, but they tell me they're beautiful, and the sunsets, of course, are gorgeous, and she captures that so much in her arts. And this is just the Three Sister Skies that she did in 2019. Beautiful piece of art. So I'm just saying that those are the things that you will find if you come to the site on, and I wanted today, but it's under reconstruction. I was going to do a little bit of exploration of the site about the forts. Charles Fort was the Reynolds Chair of Poetry here. His wife was a dancer. His daughters are both now actresses. But that site's under reconstruction because we found some new material. We wanted to rebuild it. And if you knew Charles, you know it's not unusual that we find new material because he keeps sending it to us. He was the first artist I knew who really grasped the fact that if you want to make it in the arts in America, you have to be self-promoting. You really have to go out and advance yourself because no one's going to do it for you. Except, as we say, we hope that this, in fact, will help and will help engender another generation in the arts here today. So, and now to that, just a moment. I can't do two things. As Standard has found out in many plays with me, you have to be very patient with me. You have a sheet, the back of your, the back of that, there we go. I got this stuff together here where the staple was. We would like to hear from you, and if you want to stop and talk, we'll have a moment for questions, but if you want to stop and talk, I can tell you, you don't have to have a polished piece of work to send us, just materials. If you are polishing it, that's great, but we'll polish it up for you if it needs it. I want to really give thanks, though, to Give Where You Live, the Kearney Area Community Foundation. They've been wonderful to work with, and they're our fiscal agent. But we've been supported by the Ted Baldwin Foundation and the Koch Foundation, and we're very happy to have a lot of people who've stepped in and given us stuff or been featured before. And we're very generous when we first starting this out, like the late Steve Buttress and Steve Bennett and a number of people have really been helpful to get this going. And again, you don't have to have a highbrow notion of the arts, right? We all want just as an example, we're going to be doing a feature on the culinary arts. Going to stop to think about it for just a moment. If people who grew up here, Mike Park, who's running Full Circle Bakery, grew up here in the arts. Michael Anderson, along with Yusuf Gamidi, who's at Cunningham's and Fire. Amy Northwall Schicky, who helps run Avalanche in Omaha. Sean Tye, not Tye, Theye, who has had a whole career as a chef. So we're going to do something on the culinary arts. And I say that just to open your minds about the arts and about the culture, and let us hear from you. And if you get hold of the Kearney Creates card over there, it would eventually get to me, but that's a long process. I put my own card out with it, and that'll get to me quicker. If you have an idea, want to run by, I got a call one day from Jackie Purdy. And Jackie said, you know, I had a friend I graduated high school with, and she's made a wonderful career as a harpist, and I can put you in touch with her. Would you like to be in touch? I said, absolutely, we do. And so she said, well, I'll let you get in touch with her. Here's her phone, and now you can call her up. As I'm ready to call, I'm thinking, I know when Jackie Purdy graduated. That was 1950. So I'm calling someone who's approximately that old, okay? Just a marvelously lively woman who called me back from her car phone, right? She's driving in Florida down the highway calling me about this thing, and she sent me the stuff, and that's on the site. So we're really happy that even before we thought of the Sesquicentennial, we were putting up things that were done by people who grew up here and who moved away or who stayed but continued in the arts. And that's what you'll see a lot of in 2023. Along with, we're going to run parallel with that, a feature on celebrity visitors. We've already mentioned people like Glenn Miller. Well, we all don't know much about those celebrity visitors. Probably Rick knows as much about some of as any of us do because of his profession. But if you were there, or if you heard, or if you have a story about any of the celebrity visitors that came here and played music or gave talks or came and gave exhibits at Mona, we'd love to hear from you. That's the thing that will really make the site, is for it to be a Kearney site, and that means Kearney helping. So I'd like to pause and just see if you have any questions or comments you'd like to make about this. We're running up. Yes, Connie.
I'll tell you that I had an opportunity to drive one of the storytellers that was here in town this week for a storytelling festival. And I was showing him some basic stuff in Kearney. And he wanted to stop and take a picture of McHugh's grocery. So the architecture that we take for granted, that we see all the time, I had to stop the car and he got out and he took a picture of the grocery store.
Yeah, absolutely. And architecture is, of course, one of the arts, and we hope to do a lot more with that aspect. But you're quite right. Walk even just down, walk down Central Avenue, and there are architectural wonders in this town, way ahead of many things that were in other communities. And I'll just add to that. The whole arts culture is way ahead of most other communities in Nebraska, and because of Kearney Cultural Partners, it's way ahead in terms of getting all those arts groups together in some way to work together. We've had comments from Nebraska-wide groups saying, we go to other places, even Lincoln, Omaha. They don't have what you have out here. So we're very blessed. And we're blessed with audiences. I never want to forget that. There's no use putting in a photographic exhibit or a painting exhibit at Mona if nobody comes to see it. There's no use having a concert, community concerts or whatever, if no one comes to hear. Audiences make all the difference, and we have great audiences here.
Is Art Pierce one of the people that you have?
Yes, art is up there, and there will be more art. As you know, one of the things you keep discovering more, and you have to go in and rebuild the site, but Art Pierce certainly is. Art was a marvel, and so many people, probably some of you have Art Pierce pieces in your home, and he did wonderful things with lines from poetry or with poems. He did a lot of Charles Fort's poems, painstaking, and they're great. There's a poem that Charles did that Art did the calligraphy for, that was one of the poems that he used in Afro Psalms when he did the show at Mona, that was a combination of Grant Renard's arts and his poem, etc. It's just an amazing conjunction of the arts. Anybody else want to ask anything? I don't know anything, but Rick's here, and Lauren's here, and Jerry's here, and people could answer.
Yeah, what's the website for the Butcher photographs?
Oh, Library of Congress.
Library,
Yeah, just
national.
National Library of Congress, and you just put Butcher Kearney into the search engine, it'll all pop up.
Anybody else have anything?
My parents met at 1733. My mom dated my dad's brother during World War II because he had flat feet and he got deferred. And then when my dad got home from the military, they met and started dating. And I remember they were never going to quit dancing, and they had me and they quit. But Myron Florin and Lawrence Welk, I remember saying, were some of the people that.
I'm going to stand back that door, and if you don't pick up a card to get in touch with us with this story, you're not getting to leave.
Okay, I haven't seen any pictures, so I don't know if they took the camera there, but I did hear stories about it.
Keep looking and let us know the
And
story.
then my aunt had a friend whose grandmother lived in the opera house, and when she and her friend would come and stay with her grandmother at the opera house. And I'm going to talk to my cousin. They might have pictures, or there's a little blurb that they had my aunt do before she passed away.
And don't worry about things not being complete or finished. We keep a lot of little pieces like that filed in places where as we get more, we can put them together and get a piece out of it. You would know one thing, someone else would know another, and they'd all go. Thank you. Wonderful story. Yes, Audrey.
This will be the eventual repository of the artifacts that you were collecting.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Does that mean you don't have an answer?
No, I don't know. But we have thought about that. There are these things that could be kept someplace. I would imagine what we'll do is work out something with the library. Either here or Calvin T. Ryan. Audrey is always thinking. Well, I don't know if you want to say anything else, Nathan, but I want to thank you all for coming. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.